So far, the only type of programming we've actually done is called sequential programming. That is, that every single statement that you have written in a method is executed. You don't make any choices about what happens, it just happens. To make a choice or decision about something, we use what we call control structures. And today we're going to learn about one specific type of control structure that is called an if statement. In an if statement, some condition must evaluate to be true. So what are some examples of times when you need to make these decisions? So we could ask a question. Is it raining? But is it raining isn't a true or false statement, it's a yes or a no question. So how do we make this yes or no question into a true or false statement? Well, the easy answer is to just turn it into a sentence instead of a question. So the statement, "it is raining," that statement is either true or it is false. For instance, right now as I'm making this video, it's sunny out. So the statement, "it is raining," is false. This evaluates to false. So the question, "is it afternoon?" This is conditional, it's either afternoon or it's not. But once again, this is a question, a yes or no question. And to make this into a true or false statement, we change this question into, "it is afternoon." And this statement is either true or false. Another, perhaps more applicable example for computer science is the number x positive? And of course, this is our yes or no question. And to make it into a true or false statement, we would say x is positive. And this either evaluates to true or false. So now we've talked a little bit theoretically of what an if statement is, or what the condition for an if statement is, but how do we actually write an if statement in Java? What is the syntax for it? So the syntax for an if statement is pretty simple. You start with the word if, and then a space, and an open parenthesis, and then inside the parentheses, you put the Boolean expression. So essentially, the Java value for that statement goes in here. So the Java Boolean expression goes inside the parentheses. You have a closed parenthesis, an open curly brace, and inside the curly braces, you have any number of statements from 1 to however many you need. But what is a Boolean expression, and how do you write one? Well, for example, for the x is positive statement, how might we mathematically write that? You might write x is greater than or equal to 0. And for now, we're going to say that 0 is positive, just for the purposes of this problem. So in our example, in this if statement, the Boolean expression that gets evaluated, whether it's true or false, is whether x is greater than or equal to 0. And so you'd write that in here. So the whole thing circled in red is the Boolean expression. But what do you think this is called? Well, it's the greater than or equal to sign, but that is also our Boolean operator. And we have a few different types of Boolean operators, right? So far we have the greater than or equal to sign. We've also got the less than, greater than, we've already got greater than or equal to, we have less than or equal to, we have whether something is equal, we have whether something is not equal, but you can't express all of these using ASCII values, using your keyboard. So in computer science, we write some of these a little differently. So the less than and the greater than, we write exactly how you'd think we write them. But the greater than or equal to sign, we don't have on our keyboard. So we write the greater than, and then we write an equal sign. And then for the less than or equals, we write a less than and then an equal sign. Now, those are pretty straightforward, and they make a lot of sense. But how we write the test for whether something is equal is we write two equal signs. And it's really, really important to keep that separate in your head from the single equal sign, which is an assignment operator, because those two very different things. And then the test for inequality, it's an exclamation point and an equals. So these logical operators are used in Boolean expressions, that is, expressions that can evaluate to only one of two values, either true or false. So let's run through an example problem. So let's write a Java code fragment that tests whether a given temperature is 0 or below, and if it is, the program prints out a message to the user telling us that it's frozen outside. All right, let's create this class. I'm just going to call it TempTest. And this class has no instance variables. And in the constructor, we have public TempTest. If we have a constructor with no instance variables, it's a pretty easy constructor. Just an open semicolon and a close semicolon. But let's have a method. We'll call this public is frozen, right? Because it's a test whether it's frozen. This takes no parameters. And inside the method, we need, what's the first thing we need? Well, the first thing we need is a local variable. A local variable to hold our temperature value. So temperatures are usually stored in integers, so let's call it int and int temp. And like we learned earlier, to assign a value to this local variable, we'll say int temp equals, and for now, let's just say 45. That's pretty hot because we're talking in Celsius right now. And then after that, we want to do a test to see whether our temperature is 0 or below. So this calls for an if statement. And in this if statement, I'll say if, right, because that's the syntax for writing an if statement, then open parenthesis, and we want to know if temp is less than or equal to 0. That's our Boolean expression. Temp is either less than or equal to 0 or greater than 0. All right, and then we open our curly braces, get our white space correct, and inside here, if this statement evaluates to be true, we're going to do something. We're going to print out system.out.println. Let's just say, let's print out frozen. So this is a great test to see whether something is frozen, and if it is, we do something. But what if we want to do something different if it's not frozen? So perhaps we print out not frozen. So to do that, we add an else clause to our if statement. And it's pretty easy. You write else, and that means that if our Boolean expression has not evaluated to be true, this code fragment is going to run. And so if it's not below 0, that means the temperature is greater than 0. Let's write that in a comment. Temp is greater than 0. Let's print ln not frozen. So this is another part of our if statement syntax. You have the if clause, and then you also have the option of adding an else clause. And I just realized that I forgot something in the signature of this method. And you've probably noticed this already, but I forgot to give this method a return type. So since we're not returning anything in this method, we'll give it a return type of void. You also probably may have noticed that I missed out on my closing quotation marks in my final system.out.println. So we're just going to fix that right now, and then just get rid of some of this extra space so you can see the code a little bit more clearly. So we've already done what we'll call task 2, which is print a useful message if it's not below 0. But let's add one more layer of complexity to this and print a useful message if it's boiling. And in Celsius, boiling point is 100 degrees. So how do we do this, you might ask, because we've already used our if clause and our else clause. Well, lucky for us, we have another type of clause that we are allowed to add to if statements, and those are called else ifs. So this is saying, if the first Boolean expression was not true, test out this new Boolean expression. So if we want to test whether it's boiling, our Boolean expression might be if temp is greater than or equal to 100. Not 1,000. Because we want to see, okay, well, it's not below 0, so we know it's not frozen. But what if it's above 100? So if it's above 100, let's print out system.out.println boiling. All right, so this functionally will, if the temperature is below 0 or equal to 0, it'll print out frozen. Otherwise, it tests whether the temperature is greater than or equal to 100. And if that is evaluated to be true, it will print out that it's boiling. And if that is not evaluated to be true, what do we know? We know that both of those conditions are false, and that the temperature is now between 100 and 0, because we know it's not below 0 or greater than or equal to 100. So, in the context of an if statement, the if clause is mandatory, must have the if clause. You can have as many optional else ifs as you would like, as many as you want. So that's anywhere from 0 to, you could have like an arbitrary number of else ifs. And then the else clause is also optional, but you may only have one of these. And this must always come at the end. Only one, and must be at the end. So you see that you have your if clause and your optional else clause, and in between those is where the else ifs live. All right, so let's come back to our syntax and add some more options. So we have an optional else if statement that also takes a Boolean expression and, oops, that's all blue. And then inside the else if, we also have statements. And then we have the option for an else clause that takes no Boolean expression, but inside its body also has statements. And as a closing curly brace. So I hope this clarifies a bit what if statements are and how to write them, and we'll talk about this more in class tomorrow.